Hello, everyone. Uh, can you hear me? Are you there? Hello, hello. Hello and good evening. Welcome to this Wednesday evening. I see 7 o'clock. I don't think I'm late. It's a bit lonely, this rail matter, after the fun of last week. Hello, can you, how's the sound levels? Can everyone hear? Lovely job, look at that. Wait a minute, let's get Big Face up. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. I have tea. What's everyone drinking? There's a nice mug of quite nice dark tea there. It's a good strong brew, this one. Oh, it is St. Patrick's Day, isn't it? It's Paddy's Day today, crikey, which is why I'm wearing a green t-shirt, and nothing to do with the fact this is a very green episode. Although, as we know, the colour should be blue, although it's green for St. Paddy's. It's a complicated thing. Deirdre will set us right. Anyway, right. Hello, everyone. You're all here. Let's crack on, shall we? There's quite a bit to get through, and I'm going to try and keep this one tight. Although, how many times have I said that? That's probably a bingo thing right there, isn't it? Anyway, right. Let's pop in here. So we must start. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. As always, at me in if you've got a question. Plenty of nice chat going on in the YouTube chatter, of course, as well. But if you've got a particular question, at me in, and then I can spot it. Liddle's knockoff lilt, nice work. Right, in any case, let's continue, shall we? So, episode 53, good grief. This is it, we're into year 2 of Rail Matter, good grief. Anyway, right, let's start with the news. The news this week, many things in the news, actually. Sir Peter Hendy has published an interim version, or like a first pass at the Union Connectivity Review, which is... can be summed up as a document trying to... it's like trying to put a ceramic vase back together with elastoplasts. And that's kind of the point of it. It's to mend a country that's currently in the process of disintegrating because of a load of political decisions made by the person who actually made this report a thing. So solid not Hendy, Bojo. In any case, there are some interesting things in there. There are also some very, very stupid things in there. There's a level of nuance in that it's about regional and sort of fringe flights, but there's a lot of stuff about basically incentivizing flying, continuing to incentivize flying over rail. Lots of interesting things. I suppose the most interesting thing in there is that Hendy has tactically said, don't stop pestering me about that link to the mainland. The link from the mainland over to Northern Ireland. Because he's kicked it off into the long grass and given it to some other people to look at instead. In any case, there we go. Simon Zev Kendler points out, Williams has been deferred again. The excuse is now per day. It's going to be autumn before we see Williams, but my expectation continues to be that we'll never see it. I don't expect we're going to see that document. The excuse will be that as COVID ramps down, or as we come to a third wave, which might happen later this year, that it just said they come up with the excuse that it's not relevant anymore, which of course it absolutely is. In any case, so that's the Union Connectivity Review. There's a lot of government reviews that are going to appear in there as well. Next, why did they call it Bus Back Better? Not least as Build Back Better was, I'm pretty sure, a thing coined by Momentum and then used by Labour. But anyway, whatever. Build Back Better. They've swapped Build with Bus. And it's the National Bus Strategy that is about a decade late. Campaign for Better Transport, I think, came up with it, suggested that this was desperately needed over a decade ago. And there's some interesting stuff in there. Maybe it's worth picking through, but if I did that, I'd need a bus person, because although I'm a big fan of buses overall, I think I need someone who knows that market a bit better to kind of pick through the relevant detail and the challenges. Even though I feel like I've got a reasonably good handle on what the challenges are. This graph, I suppose the main thing of the report is that it acknowledges that deregulation has been a complete disaster. There's a strong acknowledgement that deregulation of buses has just been an unmitigated failure, and for the Tories to admit that really indicates how shoddy it is. So you've got some interesting graphs here. Oh, you know what I need to do is get out the old Ella. I'm getting out the... Here it is. I'm getting the Wacom out. Here it is. Here is the Wacom. Because... Oh, it's coming. Pro as always. So this line here, the top line here is non-London English bus journeys. So that's, as you can see, there's a general trend, and that is down, very much down. The cyany kind of green, this bottom one here, is London bus journeys. So these are just local bus journeys. So it's not megabus and stuff. This is the kind of the local journeys, and you can see the trend there is very much up. So up. Now, what's the difference there? The difference is that the London wasn't included within deregulation. I don't know why I just drew those lines, but have them anyway. It wasn't included within deregulation. So, as with for the same reason that rail has climbed, people like travelling by public transport. We have reduced car ownership in urban areas where buses are better. So in London particularly, car ownership is pretty low, and as a result, numbers have climbed. You can see there's been a bit of a drop. Oh, what was going on in this period? Oh, something about fuel duty and Uber and all this stuff that should have been regulated out of existence. So yeah, you can see that more recently, even the London bus has gone down. But overall, so this is the number of total number of journeys. Non-London buses dropped down dramatically. Meanwhile, journey miles in private cars has just rocketed upwards, up and up and up. That's the middle one here. So pretty depressing state of affairs. And what's interesting is seeing where this line here is deregulation, bad. This line here is the Greater London Authority Act, which came in and I think enabled even more control of buses, which enabled more integration, and buses improved even more. So I'm not entirely sure what the GLA Act, this is why I need a bus expert, but my understanding is that's a point where the Greater London Authority gained even more control. I think, is that when TfL was actually created? Could have been. Anyway, more integration means more people use it. In any case, it's quite enough of that. Let us whiz to the next slide, because that bus strategy is something I think we'll pick through maybe in the future. Yes, that's right. Westminster is continuing its war on devolution. It's the latest, so it's already been attacking Transport for the North. Now it's attacking both Transport for the North and Midlands Connect in news that was generally received positively earlier this week, or was it later last week? Was that basically Grant Shapps, there he is, Shapsy, is wanting to poop all over Transport for the North and Midlands Connect because they're both pretty successful, but they aren't under his control, which he doesn't like. It might not just be him, actually. It's probably Treasury behind him and others. Certainly this current government, the current cabinet, have very little interest in devolution. So they're sending 2 offices up to Birmingham and up to Leeds of the Department for Transport. So officially kind of edging in and probably trying to just convert Transport for the North and Midlands Connect back down into just talking shop lobby groups rather than actual devolved transport authorities with power, which, as you'll know from my previous Rail Natter about rail structure, is a bad thing, because those organisations are both very good for the democratic control of transport services, the administration of operator licenses, or operator kind of, it's not really franchises, but whatever it ends up being, operating public transport, and indeed guiding what infrastructure should look like regionally and locally. So this is bad. So everyone said, hooray, it's going to Leeds and Brum, bits of DFT, but it's a trifling group, and essentially it's to try and muscle in on Transport for the North and Midlands Connect. So bad news, frankly, very bad news. Oh, Tottenham, which I picked a picture that's hopefully not too scary looking, because although content warning for the next image, which is a bit more scary, but it's from the old and older days, so it's maybe not quite as unpleasant. Anyway, this is is it Kirby? I think it's Kirby. I don't know that side. There's Kirby Lonsdale, Kirby Moorside, but I don't know about Kirby on the west coast. Well, I presume it's the same. Kirby crash. This is on the end of one of the lines of Merseyrail system, and one of the Merseyrail trains went pop through the slightly bizarre track layout. There's a terminal platform, but it essentially used to be a through single line platform, so they put buffers on either side. Anyway, all the debris here is because the train smashed through the walkway. There's like a pedestrian walkway just on that sort of on the side over here. Oh, I'm not going to do it over. You can see where it is. It's over this side. Here. You can't see it because this is red, but I've done scribbling. This used to be a pedestrian walkway between the 2 platforms. Now it's rubble. which is kind of, these trains are getting scrapped. It's not a big deal. No one was injured. The driver was a bit shaken up, I think, but that's fine. It's not the first time it's happened, though. As I said, this is a Class 508, so it's another PEP. The PEPs have had their little journeys, their little forays onto trying to escape over onto the other side, the non-electrified bit of the railway, a couple of times. So here is what happening before, including the fantastic token rail track bib there, or BR bib there. Really solid effort bib, as you can see, highly visible. Anyway, Kirby crash. It's getting investigated. We'll find out what happened soon enough. Talking of incidents, the Stonehaven derailment at Carmont, the two task forces, these rather kind of slightly badly formatted front covers here, but anyway, never mind. They're both the task forces, the Earthworks and Weather Advisory Task Force, have both reported, which is good. I'm gonna pick through those. They're quite heavy documents, and I think they've been summarised in kind of this thing here, which is the kind of the overall update of rail resilience. I hope they kind of all talk to each other. In any case, these three documents have all been released, so worth having a pick through. I think there's some interesting stuff there. It'd be interesting to see where it picks up any issues, any shortcomings, but I think they probably won't. They're probably looking forwards. I expect the RAIB report, which should come soon, I hope. Hopefully that'll say some more stuff about the kind of problems with operations. One of the main reasons I think the Carmont RAIB report is going to be delayed is because it's going to say a lot of very unpleasant things about high-speed trains. Probably along the lines of, we told you these shouldn't have been on the railway in 2004 after Nervit, and you didn't listen to us. Why are they still on the railway? In any case, and then that's going to obviously get watered down by people who, even though RAIB is supposed to be independent, I expect there'll be some. After Nervit, there certainly was some watering down of what the recommendations were in that, because they essentially wanted to say, don't run HSTs anymore. It's ridiculous. They're still running. They're not safe trains, relatively speaking. Right. Anyway. So those will be interesting to look through. Next news item. Let's cheer ourselves up with some nonsense. Here is some nonsense. Actually, I need that this Wacom is necessary, but I'm going to pick a different colour because I think these are all with greens. So let's go for yellow. I'm just going to have a sip of tea, actually. So the Cambridge Autonomous Metro is back in the news. Sorry for that very high fidelity sound of me supping tea. As you can see here, lots and lots of cycling provision in this visualization. Really good. There's someone here stealing a bike, which is people pointed out on Twitter. I like that a lot. Also, people pointed out this, which is just wrong according to LTM 120. That's not. I mean, even before that, the standards is just not how that works. And also somehow a load of parking. Anyway, whatever. This is Cambridge Autonomous Metro. The three kind of outline proposals have concepts, rather. They're not proposals; they're concepts. Have been put forwards. I don't even know what to describe it. So we have a variety of different things here. So you can see this is a what is this? It's a bus. That's what it is. It is a bus. The next one, as you can see, this is going to be very difficult to read. I need to get a different colour, don't I? Let's face it. Let's go for purple. It's a bus. It's a bus, everyone. Although what I do quite like is that this bus, which, again, there's some fantastic cycle parking here. That's just excellent cycle parking. Just the state of these. I've written about this, and nothing has changed. These proposals are as ridiculous as I expected them to be, if not worse. I like this one, though. It's like, we can have a bus, or, alternatively, these things, which are known as cars. The cars. Everyone, these are cars. I know that people are saying they're not cars. No, these are just cars. This is just a taxi lane. It is just a taxi lane. It's just a taxi lane. There we are. It's just a taxi lane. If you can only carry 4 or 5 or 6 people in it, it's a taxi. It doesn't matter if it's got a driver or not. That's just a taxi. It's not. There's nothing about this that is mass or rapid transit. Certainly not a metro. Anyway, you've all heard this rant before. In any case, yeah, it's just total gibberish. Bus. No, it's just a bus. A railless tram is a bus. It might be a very expensive and unproven bus, but it's still a bus. And the funniest one of all are these. These are absolutely hilarious. What the hell is this? This. Let's do this. Oh, I need my yellow back again, don't I? Basically, let's get red back. Red's going to solve our problems here. This thing. This is what? Well, what is it? It's just. It's pods. It's just cars. These are just expensive cars. It's a car. That's a car, everyone. Yes. So what? It's yeah. I just don't get. I do not get what people. Why have people forgotten what cars? These are just cars. These are just cars. Whenever anyone talks about these things, just say it's cars. Mikhail Colville-Anderson would call this arrogance of space. Yeah, I'll bet. What's nice is that this is bulldozed quite an important kind of green space in Cambridge to insert. This one's particularly funny because this is exactly what the loop looks like, which again is just taxis. It's just taxis, everyone. So if you want to see what this ends up looking like, go look at the Las Vegas loop. I'm doing rabbit ears, which is just cars. It's just cars. Anyway, enough about cars. Let's talk about. Oh yeah, this came in. This is hot off the press, everyone. In fact, there's a bit of hot off the press stuff in here. This one's particularly hot off the press, which is that next year will be the end of, and probably the permanent end of, private railway operators in Scotland. They're done. Finito. I hope that now all of the ScotRail staff will just be 2p'd over, but Alex Hines, who is brilliant. I don't know what other people think of Alex on here, but my perspective is that Alex Hines is brilliant. He's one of those managers like Crowther and Horn, who are names that just stick with me as the sort of railway managers who just know the railway, know the system, and are fantastically inspirational and good and positive. I hope he hangs around because he's done, to my mind, he's a very positive asset for Scotland's railway. So hopefully he hangs around. Rail na Alba, yeah, ScotRail. So yeah, there's a reason I've got the BR logo there. It's because it's going to be it's coming back in house. That's it. It'll be nice. I mean, it won't. It'll just look the same as it always does. But anyway, there's Rail Alphabet 2 and the BR logo and the Forth Bridge, and combining them is nice. Yeah, I'd love to get Alex Hines on. Alex, there's a potential that you watch these. If you do, hi. I'd love to have you on. I actually want to get. I'd like to get. He is the gaffer at NR, that's true. Oh, that's a very good point. He is the NR gaffer, so it'd be unlikely he'd... I presume maybe then his contract shifted. Because I think he was an Abellio employee, but perhaps he changed over when he became route, whatever the combined route managing director title is now, where it's combined with the TOC. Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point. In any case, right. Yeah, awesome guy for the Settling Carlisle plan dump, if nothing else. Thanks, David Bumstead. Yeah, fair point. It'd be great to get. I'd love to get Diane Crowther. I'd love to get David Horn, who's absolutely lovely, and Alex Hines is also lovely. They're just lovely. They're lovely and impressive. They're impressive managers. Leaders and managers, whatever you want to call them, you do need some good managers, and those three are names that jump to mind. There might be others out there. Feel free to recommend on the in the chat and then on the Discord. Anyway, right. Well, without further ado, let's crack on, shall we? It's already 7:20, but I don't think I'm going to talk. I don't think I'm going to talk hours and hours about the report. So I think we should be all right. In any case, hello everyone. You're all chatting away. Love seeing you all. Lots of lovely familiar faces. I'm so pleased to see you all. There are 84 of you watching. Welcome. Hopefully some Scottish Greens in here. Maybe even some GPW members. If you are here, I'm waving at you. In any case, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. City 225 fading away. The Scottish Greens. Your logo's up. If any Scottish Greens are watching, say hi in the chat. I'm going to bring my face back because I think that's generally the format, isn't it? I'm in the corner. Hello, everyone. My lights are very yellowy red, so they make me look completely flushed. Pink, but I'm at peace with it. I I'm going to put the Wacom away because it can do me no positive now because everything's going to be in that PDF. In any case, that's a good point. I'll need to open the PDF and get it to two-page spread. We can fix that. It's fine. So the Scottish Greens, I've written it. So I wrote a piece on this that's in. Actually, where is it? It's in here. Let's get Big Face up briefly. So this is kind of. It's not that I'm just stealing. I'm just kind of recycling old content. I think it's interesting to actually explore it and do a page turn. I kind of promised when I did this publication I would. But there's my piece in Rail Magazine where I talk about it. I was quite like. I was cautious when I first heard that this was happening, and then as I've seen it appearing, some Irish Greens in here. Hello everyone. There's some as I kind of had a look through it, saw it. I was pleasantly surprised, and the word that I wanted to use was the word I kind of used was bold but realistic. That's the phrase rather that I've been using to describe it because it is bold, but also it's realistic. It's not. It's I mean it's got enough detail to be critiqued, which is a thing that the Green Party of England and Wales have been incapable of doing in their entire existent history when it comes to rail. So that's in and of itself a positive, and we'll come to that. And in fact, I am going to mention the Green Party of England and Wales a few times. I can only apologise. Well, no, I'm not going to apologise. Actually, it's probably worth me just saying now. Much as I'm a Labour Party member, I probably would be a Scottish Green if I was north of the border. If I was back home north of the border, I'd probably be a Scottish Green rather than Labour because Labour are non-existent north of the border. Don't get me wrong, I'd have to reevaluate that if I was living in Scottish politics. I'd maybe have a different view to it. But certainly from the perspective of someone, grass is always greener, right? But I'm over the border, from the perspective of me living here in York, I'd have to say I'd be inclined towards Scottish Green. However, not English and Welsh Green, for reasons that I'll get into when we go through the report. And what I've enjoyed about this report, probably more than anything else, is the extent to which it throws shade on the completely untenable position of the Green Party of England and Wales. The confusion between policy, conference statements, the illiteracy of some of the stuff that they come out with, their reliance on right-wing sound bites to back up rail policy, and their broad stance against rail across the whole of England and Wales summarises why there is such a huge gaping gap and hole between the two separate parties. So the reason I put those logos up is to point out they are separate parties. Ella, hello there. In any case, there we are. Right, I've talked about that. Let's whiz into this report, shall we? Page 1. Actually, I'm going to escape page 1 because we need to go in here and quickly do... I forgot to do this thing, didn't I? Which is go in here and go to view, page display, and make it... How did I do it again? It was full screen. I can't blink and remember. Hopefully this works. Let me just see. The thing is, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think it's fine. It's fine. We'll go page by page like this, and I don't think it's going to screw up the formatting at all. So here it is. This is it. This is the PDF. It's a rail natter format that people love, which is it's PDF page flipping. So here's the page. To give you an idea, this is the last page. This page 18. So there's not a huge amount in terms of detail, but there's plenty to talk about. So we'll go through it. It's John Finney, isn't it? Who's kind of in charge, not the author, but who's in charge of this document. I think has John put a foreword in it. I'm not sure he has. In any case, I think he has the transport brief, doesn't he? So Ella, I did get your DM. Don't worry. So rail. The report is called. Oh, you can't see me. That's what I need to do. Let's get you up here. I didn't show you. Here's the PDF. There we go. Let me just show you this. I was getting excitable and forgetting that I hadn't shown you everything going on. There we are. 10, 11. So it's quite a nice, neat document. It doesn't overstretch itself. Like you cannot pretend to have done more research than you have. It's quite a reasonable document. Funnily enough, it's structured very similarly to my own Network 2050 first draft that never made it out because Williams appeared and everything just went up in the air, and it's been so unstable I've not wanted to push Network 2050 out. I've learned a lot, and things have changed sufficiently that I changed that document now. Hopefully there'll be a new version coming out at the end of this year now that the world has changed a little bit. But so there's Aberdeen, by the way, on that. It's a view that I recognise quite well because that was my main home terminal kind of big city station. For me, that was like big city stations that I grew up with, was getting the train from Aberdeen. It was always very exciting, despite the fact that it has 2 platforms. Yeah, you're messaging me, but it's fixed. I fixed it. Yeah, I fixed it, everyone. Yeah, you're behind me. Just shows how behind you I am. Yes, thanks. Don't spam the thing. Just at me once. I'll spot it. Everyone's atting. Thanks. Anyway, right. So this is front cover. Nice. Rail for All is what the report's called. Delivering a modern zero carbon rail network in Scotland. It's a policy briefing, and this is, to my mind, the only document like this that has been created, certainly in modern history, by any national party, any at all. The MS Edge annotation feature, if you have a suitable device, produces PDFs that aren't massively large. See, I could. There are a variety of ways I could do PDF viewing. Maybe I'll pro it. But to be honest, I think it's quite clear enough. I think so long as I'm describing it, people can sort of see what's going on. Particularly in these, it's quite nicely laid out. So it's worth saying this document was put together by Deltix Transport Consulting. Yeah, it's for John Finney. Yeah, I thought so. Deltix, the main chap in Deltix actually has an anti-HS2 view, but which does not, I have to say, does not come across in this report, because, well, various things. We'll point out the shade that's thrown on it. In any case, so it's basically, and this is throughout this whole thing, I say bold and realistic. Actually, it's quite modest, and one of my criticisms of it is its modesty in terms of what it proposes. But I suppose there's two fronts on that. One, the Scottish rail network is pretty small, so actually there's only so much money you can spend on it. Although they're kind of fairly ambiguous about some of the bigger spend items. Maybe that's a criticism. We'll get there later, but basically it is quite robust. They go into costings and yeah. So the rail network there's only so much you can spend on it, and as a result of that, the numbers we're talking about, the capital investiture numbers, are quite small. In any case, let's see. What am I going to do now? I'm going to tell you about the contents. Let's go through. So the way this is structured, the first thing they tackle is the admin side, actually. They talk about the admin of the railway, which I'm glad they did first, because you can't fix anything. Infrastructure is useless if you are not organising sufficiently to either plan, deliver, work out what that needs to be, and then get the operations right. So you need to deal with the admin first, the structure, the shape of the railway. And indeed, the current government in Scotland has just, the Scottish government has just announced kind of part one or part two of that. So we'll come to that in a second. So that's chapter one is talking about creating the delivery infrastructure, how to deliver this railway network, which is good. And there's some good stuff in there, I think. Number two, and then basically after that, to be honest, for the next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sections, talking about, is anyone getting any audio feedback, by the way? Is it buzzing, or is it all right? 8 sections, and it kind of, they're splitting down, again, annoyingly similar how to I had in my original Network 2050 draft, which is kind of going through the headline, the intercity services, and basically working down in speed and in terms of essentially looking at the backbone and then breaking out into if you imagine the rail network as a fractal, you're breaking down into the kind of the tendrils, or a tree, if you like. You're going out into the branches, which is where you get to the kind of the rural services. Yeah, it's good stuff. And they talk about stations, they talk about freight, zero carbon rail. Yes, it's well structured, and then they finish off with a couple of key things. They finish off talking about zero carbon rail, talking about the costs of these proposals, of this plan, and then they end talking about COVID. And I think it's a really important way to round out a document. Any document talking about public transport at the moment needs to essentially avail people of their misapprehensions about the world after COVID, or rather the world in endemic rather than pandemic COVID, because COVID ain't going away anytime soon. So. Sensibly structured, basically. So that's what you can basically say about a contents page, isn't it? Let's go to the next page. So these are so they kind of start off with 5 principles, but this is basically the executive summary for those who are too lazy to flick through. Thanks for letting me know that the audio is perfect. Roaming ad crap, very kind. Hello to everyone, by the way. 100 people watching. I'm glad to have you all with us. It's crazy. I don't know. It's a PDF, everyone. I mean, I'm glad to have you all, and hopefully it's interesting. If you've got questions or suggestions or thoughts, I know there's a little bit of a delay, but they normally come in. I'm usually on the same page by the time they come through, so should be fine. So. These 5 principles are: everything proposed here in the accompanying expert report is based on existing technologies. It's funny they have to explicitly say that, but I'm so glad they do, because the only way we're going to get this stuff happening quickly is by using the stuff. As I always say, I've said a dozen times, We've solved transport. Technology-wise, we've done it. We've solved it in the same way that we've solved potable water and solved electricity transmission. We know how to do that. We've done that now. What we need to do is roll it out. The challenges are not technological; they're political. Number 2, the rail network should be zero carbon, and full electrification is the best way of doing this, given that the often suggested alternative, hydrogen from renewable energy, is a limited resource that is best used in sectors where there are no alternatives, such as heavy industry. It's very sensible. There is a place for hydrogen on the rail network, I think. But this point of the fact that if you're going to use hydrogen as a resource, you'd be better to use it on things like, for example, shipping or other or kind of where you basically need to burn something. Hydrogen is the way to be doing that, not the railways. When you can power railways with electric, there is an easy, straightforward way of powering railways. So yeah, I think that's not an unreasonable stance to take. That's fair enough. So they're basically taking an anti-hydrogen stance, which I don't think is necessarily unsensible. It does mean that means that they cannot use battery on the West Highland. So ultimately, it means talking about electrification up the West Highland, up the far north. So that's kind of interesting. We'll maybe get to that. Number 3 of the principles. Journey times should be significantly reduced, particularly between key Scottish cities and economic centres, to enable rail to become the dominant mode for long-distance travel. Absolutely critical point that seems totally lost on their pals down south of the border. And when I'm talking about HS2, I rarely make the journey time argument because it's too easy for people to then just ignore it because it's the one they've heard a lot. But actually, journey times are important. They are important. Improving journey times is directly correlated to driving modal shift, particularly away from air, but also from roads. And in Scotland, road is often, it's not air, it's road is often the competitor on the longer distances. So, that is critical. And the fact that they state that explicitly as the third thing on this list of principles is, I think, kind of one in the eye to the GPEW. Anyway. So, number 4, all communities of more than 5,000 people should be connected to the national rail network, and where this is not possible at realistic cost, they should be provided with an integrated coach route as part of the national strategic rail network. Absolutely agree with this. This is such a powerful principle. And this is essentially calling to TACT FAR plan to TACT plan, which is a thing I've talked about on RailNet quite a bit, which is a reference to... It is a reference to the idea that there should be a baseline minimum provision at any settlement, and indeed, if you go to Switzerland, villages down to tiny populations are guaranteed a minimum reliable minibus service right the way up to an intercity frequency mainline, depending on the size of the settlement. So this is the right way to look at a rail network, and I am working behind the scenes on an automatic system to essentially show what a network should look like in Great Britain, based on population density. That's some fun stuff that I'm working on at the moment. It's based on that same principle. You don't go, what railways used to exist? Oh, we should reinstate those. No. You go, what towns, what settlements, what people. I talk about people-led solutions. What people are currently not provided for by our public transport network. This is a really good principle. So I'm a big fan of that number 4. Number 5, rail freight gets a mention, which is really important. Rail freight showed itself to be resilient throughout the pandemic. This is absolutely true. Simon, you're in the chat. You can confirm this. You're making your tea at the moment, I think, but I'm sure you can nod on this. It showed itself to be resilient throughout the pandemic, and a continued shift in freight from road to rail will substantially reduce carbon emissions and ease congestion on the road network. Absolutely. Key corridors would be the intercity corridors, actually, for freight in Scotland. The A9 corridor over Dromochter, an absolutely critical, Dromochter to Slough, so Perth to Inverness, critical one. Lots of freight travels that route and should be almost entirely shifted where it can be onto rail. No reason not to. But if you're going to do that, you need to double the whole thing and electrify it. Hint, hint. We'll get there. So yeah, 5 really strong principles. I'm seeing some Green Party of England and Wales members getting envious of these already in the chat. So it's true, Richard. I just want to highlight under this, but this first paragraph in the introduction, I love it. Whilst many, I'm going to read this out. Should I do it in an exaggerated Scottish? Should I do it in should I hark back to my Inverurie roots? Whilst many European countries have built high-speed lines and long-distance connections that crisscross the continent and provide an affordable, comfortable and low-carbon option for commuting, business and leisure travel, Scotland, and Britain as a whole, has systematically underinvested in the rail network in favour of roads. It'd be wonderful if the Green Party of England and Wales could just make that explicit statement. In any case, that first written sentence in the document, essentially the first part of the body of the report, is explicitly throwing shade on the Green Party of England and Wales, and I'm all for it. I am here for this shade. I love it. In any case, so I'm not going to read out every page. I just love this opening is just sort of explaining, and they use the classic example of Edinburgh to Dundee in 57 minutes compared to today's 64 minutes, so it's got slower. That's because we got rid of the direct line, although that direct line was got rid of by British Rail as part of the agreement. They would get more autonomy, they'd get their own Scottish region, and they had to sell it to the people building the M90, well, to the government basically building the M90. As part of their agreement, they had to shed certain mileage of network, and that saw the chop because as a line, strategic benefit, but it didn't have much population on it, so that one got the chop rather than the Fife Coast, which in hindsight was deeply stupid. The alignment of that old route wasn't great in honesty, but interestingly, that was built when the Forth Bridge was built, so that was one of the lines that was built to serve the Forth Bridge. Go and read my Medium piece on the Forth Bridge where I talk about when the Forth Bridge was built and the connecting infrastructure was hopeless alongside it. Anyway, one of the things I think will be interesting through this when I pick this up, I'm conscious it's already 25-2. This isn't going to be a 2-hour max one, I promise. In any case, one of the things that's interesting is I do have, and people can look up the old Scottish route strategy. I don't know if it's been updated, the old route utilisation strategy for Scotland. I think it has been. I think there is a newer one which talks about the things that are basically in the works that Network Rail Scotland are kind of thinking about. And so I'll kind of make sideways reference to those through here, although my knowledge might be a little out of date because that hopefully has just been updated. Hopefully it has been refreshed because there's a lot going on behind the scenes in Transport Scotland at the moment. Anyway, right, let's get into this now. So, section 1, creating the delivery infrastructure. This is the bit where we're talking about the admin stuff. And they've broken it down to 4 kind of headlines, which are to streamline decision-making processes and rebalance them in favour of rail, to create one publicly owned operator, to make a strategic decision to deliver a modern zero-carbon rail network and a line behind this. We'll unpick all these in a second. And the 4th is to establish a task force and to plan and steer the expansion and improvement of the rail network. This last one is... we'll come to it. So the first one, streamline decision-making processes. So this really is talking about the fact that there are several overlapping and duplicating processes to decide whether infrastructure investment is a good idea. So just like south of the border, you've got WebTag. In Scotland, you've got STAG, STAG, but the Scottish Transport Appraisal Guidelines, the Scottish Transport Appraisal Guidance process, which is extremely detailed, complicated, time-consuming, costly, blah, blah, blah. Its application by Transport Scotland is pedantic, and it leads to major additional costs for proposed developments. Yeah, I buy into this. This obsession with building complex business cases is as a result of the lack of this document, or rather what this document would lead to if the government had one of these. And this applies, by the way, everything I'm going to talk about it in Scotland context, but it absolutely applies, and I'm sure everyone watching will see how it applies to the whole of Great Britain. The idea, basically, the reason you have all these business cases, because there's no strategic view of what the rail network should look like and what it should achieve. You go through all these silly business case things to work out, is this individual little project that I've got my blinkers on looking at actually worth doing? You don't need to do those processes if you know that the thing you're proposing to do fits within the wider strategy. You need a lot less analysis to go, so double tracking you don't need to do you basically don't need to do a business case. You just have such a long list of no regrets projects like doubling the Highland Main Line, electrifying it. There is nothing that doesn't solve. There are no regrets in doing that. So you don't need to go through what would be probably the best part of 2 or 3 million quid's worth of stag to decide that it's a good idea. Just dispense with that. So that's kind of about what this discussion is. It's also considering the fact that GRIP, which is the governance for rail investment projects, which is the network rail process, which is fine. Like GRIP is, people moan about GRIP all the time. Like, don't get me wrong, there are issues with GRIP, sure, and there are areas where GRIP could be improved. But actually, GRIP just follows the standard process of any project. Scope, specifying, scoping, outline design, detailed design, construction, then post-construction review. testing, commissioning, all this, that is a project cycle that happens everywhere. So you can get rid of grip, but that project process still exists. You still need to have stage gates to actually go through those and make sure you've done the right thing. So you can't get rid of grip, but what you can do is see where there are essentially hoops you have to jump through for grip and stag. Then it makes no sense to be doing it makes no sense to be duplicating that. So it does make sense to have a holistic view of what the process is to decide that a railway project should happen, and then get rid of the duplication and streamline it. This makes sense. So, I'm all for that one. So let's go. So the next one is kind of obvious and is about to happen anyway. Create one publicly owned operator. So Scotland's railway network is sort of already, I'd argue, basically doing this now anyway. In Scotland, the fragmentation of the rail network is very limited because already you've got one TOC, you've got Network Rail Scotland, and they're both under Alex Hines now, so they are operating broadly in the sense. And given that ScotRail is as we've just seen, about to be not nationalised. There's no such thing as nationalisation. It's about to be brought under state control. Basically, the Scottish government is going to stop just like the Westminster government can. They're going to stop pretending that it isn't entirely under government control, because that's all privatisation is. All they're doing is paying someone to pretend that they're in control of the railway. That's literally what the function of franchising is, or certainly was until the pandemic. It's now completely collapsed, obviously. So basically, that's what's recommended, and that's happening already. So win. Next, right. So the strategic decision. This relates to what I was just talking about. So this is related to electrification particularly, and it's saying that the Scottish government, as early as possible, needs to make a clear strategic decision to prioritise delivery of electrification. Basically, what they're saying is, don't faff around with that with the electrification plan. Yes, that's now broadly published, but it's not set in stone. It needs to just be set in stone entirely and ideally accelerate. That's really what's being said here in point 3. If you've got queries, do at me in, by the way. Does this count as abolish the Treasury on the bingo? Michael C. I'm not sure it does, but that probably did. Then the last one's more interesting, and there's always the risk that this becomes a talking shop. Like, theoretically, this is what, like this number 4, the establishing a task force to plan and steer the expansion and improvement of the rail network. This is sort of what Transport Scotland should do anyway, and should. So you don't want to duplicate work. You don't want to do any empire building. There's always a risk you end up with blokes trying to do empire building when you create a new sort of task force. And you do not. And the last thing you want is blokes doing empire building, which is exactly what is currently happening with the battles between Transport for the North. To an extent, was a bit of blokey empire building. There was quite a lot of blokey empire building at the top of that organisation, as evidenced by some of its conferences, I have to say. But behind the scenes, a lot of good stuff was happening, and that's now being pooped on by current government. Blokey empire building is bad, but I can understand, and I don't necessarily disagree with what's being said here, which is the idea of just essentially having a dedicated. I think what they're trying to say is having a dedicated team that does rolling programs of all of these things, not just electrification, but new stations. So essentially all their sections in here, they want a team to be dedicated on delivering this and getting good at delivering it, understanding with the legislative and engineering kind of hurdles that you have to tackle to deliver these things and then get good at it. So the thing, well, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sort of task forces they've outlined. So the first is stations. The second is actually reopening existing or making existing freight lines work for passenger trains. So that's fine. The next one is electrification, rolling program. The one after that is small-scale electrification to eliminate pockets of diesel working. So it's a separate team to deliver that. That's kind of fair enough, because there are quite different beasts having, major program electrification compared to small-scale infill electrification are arguably slightly different beasts. That's fair enough. Provision of large numbers of low-cost all-day electrical trickle charge points at railway station. Okay, so they've kind of thrown in a bit of basically trying to encourage all electric travel. So converting parking spaces into electric parking spaces and a team to deliver that. That's fair enough. Fits within a broader transport plan, which is good, but they're not saying too much more detail about that, which I think is fair enough. I'm pointing at this screen, by the way. If I look at like I'm being a bit weird, because I have it on this screen over here, even though it is actually in front of me as well on my dashboard. The next one, the last one, is then development of walking and cycling plans for every single station. Provision of electric bikes and kind of tying that in together. So that kind of all makes sense. Those are the sorts of those are the sorts of things. Matt Reed asks, does Scotland have more money to spend on its railways? It doesn't, no, but it chooses to. Transport is devolved to Scotland. Scotland's in charge of its pot of money, as Wales should be, but isn't. Scotland's in charge of its own transport budget and spends still quite a trivial amount compared to the amount that they spend on roads. So they should be spending more. The SNP are pretty pro-roads. Despite the positive things that we see south of the border, actually, they're quite pro-roads. So it's quite nice to see the Green Party challenging them on that, actually. So yeah. Right. So that's all very fine and good. Let's go into the first section, which is where it gets fun. So particularly this map here, you can see this map, which is the one that everyone talks about. So this is talking about the intercity services of the country, and what I'm going to do is go through kind of the bullet points and describe what they say, and then I'll come back to the fourth tunnel because I know that's what you're all here to talk about. But actually, I think I want to talk about each of the individual routes first. So how are we doing time-wise? 1:45 already. Blinking egg. So first of all, they're talking Glasgow, Stirling, Perth, Dundee. It's already relatively fast. Upgrades still needed to cut carbon, reduce travel times. Yeah, I need to electrify the rest of the line. Yep, that's all fine and fairly sensible. Can reduce journey times a bit. Edinburgh, Perth and Dundee, these are pathetic, frankly, for intercity lines. I always get frustrated. I was really frustrated when Dundee had its waterfront rebuilt and the land cleared above the stupid Dundee tunnel, and the opportunity wasn't taken to straighten out the stupid kink and rebuild the railway tunnel coming out of Dundee towards the north, because it's just pants. Anyway, so they're talking about that in this. They're talking about the fact that long stretch of single track up to Perth with speeds down to 30 and 50 miles an hour, which is pathetic for intercity lines. Yeah, fully agree. It's rubbish. Major investment needed. Absolutely agree. The West Coast Main Line. So here we're getting interested. And indeed, there are longer-term plans to do. In fact, I say longer-term plans. The Transport Scotland are currently looking at, in practical and sensible detail, work not just north of the Scottish border on the West Coast Main Line, but south of the Scottish border on the West Coast Main Line to deliver, by the time HS2 opens in full, to deliver 3-hour services to Glasgow and Edinburgh. So that work is ongoing and strongly likely to happen, actually, as long as HS2 is finished. West Coast Main Line, so they're talking about congestion between Carstairs and Glasgow. Yeah, that's a major challenge. And it's congested to the point where and because it's in a suburban and urban area, you'd struggle to do anything other than entirely segregating, just as has happened into Birmingham, into Manchester, into Leeds and London as part, and Euston as part of HS2. So, real challenge. So they're talking about a programme of upgrades, including a high-speed bypass from south of Carstairs to west of Rutherglen, and a high-speed link towards Edinburgh using the existing Shotts line, so long as it parallels and does not displace Shotts services, because you start undoing capacity benefits if you displace stuff off the Shotts line. Provision of more loops for freight. So whatever that looks like, it has to be very well integrated with freight as well, because it's an incredibly busy freight corridor over the top of Beatwick on the West Coast Main Line alongside the M74. Very, very busy line. So there, already we've seen them strongly recommending, well, not just recommending, they are advocating for high-speed lines. So, yeah, very, very different to the party south of the border. Very, very different. So, Michael Sears, you're right, lots of assertions about the tunnel. Michael C, you're absolutely right in your assertions, but we'll get there in a minute. The other corridors, the Dundee-Aberdeen line is talking about incremental improvements alongside electrification, getting rid of manual signalling with automatic, proper, actual, 20th century signalling rather than Victorian signalling. Longer loops. So they're not saying full double tracking, they're just saying longer dynamic loops to allow, trains to not get in each other's way. The Highland Main Line, this is a good one. It's 2/3 single track, which is a major restriction on capacity. So that here they actually say they say adding dynamic loops to the line, extending shorter existing loops. They say that another 30 miles of double track would be enough to make a substantial difference in capacity. Basically being kind of realistic, and this is why I talk about the pragmatism. Like, I would like the whole line to be double, but they've worked out that they can get a lot with just 30 miles worth of double track. Fair enough. And so they're saying ideally the whole line would be double track, but this is their words now. Ideally, the whole line would be double track, but in our proposal, in addition to electrification... Oh, they've not worded that right. But our proposal, in addition to electrification, would deliver major improvements quickly and lay the groundwork for full dualling. It's pragmatic, it's sensible. I think it's, much as I'd like the whole lot to be doubled, I think it's indicative that this is not just a pie in the sky wish list. They are taking some pragmatic, and it's not so much about cash. There's some people talking about paying for one thing before the other. Not cash is unimportant. Money is free. Capital expenditure is free. The issue is limited resources and time. There's only so much we can do at once. We're given a limited pool of engineering resource north of the border. I'll point out that a lot of engineering for Scottish projects for Network Rail right now happens in England. There are simply not enough engineers to deliver the work happening in Scotland at the moment. And actually, because there's so much Scottish work, it props up a lot. It employs a lot of English engineers at the moment as well. So this is like it's reassuring to see this kind of pragmatic approach. So this is them saying Aberdeen Inverness. That's my old home turf. Inverurie to Inverness. There, it's a long single track line, slow by intercity standards. It's got a maximum speed of 75 miles an hour. Most of it's at 60. Electrify it, stick dynamic loops in, get rid of level crossings and lengthen stations. Would bring journey times down to under an hour 45, which would compare to the existing fastest service at 2 hours 9. So it's not a huge improvement, but a decent improvement. That's sort of supposedly been in the works for a very long time, but it's been pushed back quite a few times. David Shepherd, yeah, I think you're right. That is basically what they mean. Yeah, so getting the 30 miles of double track up and running, and then once that's already in operation, you can then once you've won that, rather than wait for the whole lot, you can then continue doing doubling later. Yeah, exactly. And then they talk about the East Coast Main Line, so down from Edinburgh towards kind of through East Lothian and then towards Newcastle. And they talk about the fact that there are lots of fast bits up to 125 miles an hour. The line is much slower south of Dunbar. Capacity is limited. There aren't enough loops. All this sort of thing. And they're saying again, it's a problem that needs to be resolved, and that we need to grade separate Portobello Junction in Edinburgh. That's going to be a beast of a bit of work but necessary, because there's a lot going on there, particularly with the frequency of services down the Borders Railway. Real conflict, and they need to 4-track. That inner part in Edinburgh as well. That is not explicitly mentioned here. Oh no, they do. Yeah, sorry. A section of 4-track railway to allow more services to East Lothian. Yeah, so I think they are basically referring to the fact that you need to 4-track the line wherever it's in Edinburgh. So that's good. Again, sensible stuff. So I'm not skipping it. Don't worry. Let's talk about this tunnel then. And this is the bit a lot of you are here for, I think. And yes, as Michael C. pointed out, basically think of this tunnel as a bit like the arguments I make for HS2. This is not to replace the current route over the Forth, so over the fantastic Forth Bridge. But the issue you have is I should basically have put the map onto a thing so I could scribble on it. No, let me have a think. See if I can actually do that right now. Let me think. Where did I put it? Yeah. No, I can't. I don't think I can. But what I can do is, so I can describe, and hopefully everyone gets what I mean. So, as was the case when the Forth Bridge was built, actually, both the north and south, the railway networks, both north and south of the bridge, are heavily congested because you've got a horrible mix of stopping services, through services, different types of. You've got freight kind of in amongst some of it as well. Just an absolute pig of an operating timetable. Just a real mess. And upgrading that, it's all horribly complicated and expensive to do because everything's built right up against. It's 2-track. You can't really do much more over the bridge. You can electrify it, but other than that, real challenges in terms of everything either side is just super congested. So if you're going to upgrade either side, you then end up with a pinch point at the Forth Bridge, and upgrading either side would cost billions. Don't get me wrong, billions. You'd need to, not least because you've got the challenge of the heavily constrained corridor between Waverley and Haymarket. 4 tracks, and utterly saturated. You cannot squeeze any more trains through there. The only way you could get more trains through there is by coupling up 3 or 4 consists in Haymarket and pushing them through all in one lump. It's just nightmarishly busy. So actually, the reason why this tunnel option is clever is not only does it bypass all of the congestion on the Fife Coast, bypasses all of the congestion on the approaches through Gyle and kind of into Edinburgh that side through Haymarket, but it bypasses that congested 4-track section between Waverley and Haymarket, which is absolutely full, and there's nothing you could do other than putting another 2 tracks along there to fix it, and no one is There is not a chance in hell that you can put another 2 tracks through along that corridor unless you bury them underneath. It's not going to happen. It's in the middle of Edinburgh. It'd be horribly complicated. You'd be buying up sections of Printer Street Gardens. It just ain't happening. Just is not happening. And so, forget that. So the only thing you can really do is either you do something about bypassing it with the south sub, but it's not really practical. So it's quite clever to then go, well, okay, firstly, Leith is a massive urban area, one of the most densely populated areas in Europe, and it doesn't have its own station. It's not connected by the mainline to the mainline railway network. So reinstate a Leith, recreate a new Leith station. Connect that with infrastructure whizzing down using a mixture of existing stuff and new alignment. And then as you approach the coast, where you've got plenty of brownfield site plus docks to bring equipment and stuff in to build the tunnel, like it's a really obvious, it's coastal. You can set up the tunnel boring equipment there, build a big box, put it all down, tunnel up towards, up in the direction of Waverley and then down out under the Forth. Actually not that crazy an idea. And then you put your tunnel underneath. Tunnels, okay, they're expensive, they're big hitter items, but they're reasonably, once you've set it up, it churns and goes and then it's done. It's not super easy, but it's quite predictable engineering. We've got a reasonably good geological understanding of the Forth. We've tunnelled under the Forth from one end to the other before, not that long ago. It's over at the end. I think it's just off the map actually, westwards. There was 2 coal mines that connected underneath the Forth, but we've tunnelled under the Forth several times, mostly in mining. So this is not entirely untried territory. And then you connect up to the north, and you link up with Kirkcaldy, which is a major urban area, sub-G Brown, and then you connect up into the network there, and then whiz northwards towards Dundee and Aberdeen onwards, and also connecting up Perth Express and Inverness. So this is being pitched as an alternative to reconnecting northwards of Inverkeithing and north, that directly north. Wait a minute, let me just quickly do something here. There we are. I just need to remind myself of. Let me see. Yeah, so basically going pretty much north from like Dunfermline, that line that no longer exists. The idea is basically like they don't think they need that if they build this tunnel. It avoids that work. And it also means that then it's easier for you to then make kind of incremental upgrade. You don't need to do as much upgrading. If you're not having services that are bypassing, you can have stopping services, then you can do more incremental work on the existing lines either side of the Forth Bridge. So it's clever. It's a clever idea. Yes, so that is there's lots of chat going on, but not any ads. So I'll be happy with that. That's fine. Don't seem to be any questions. I'm pleased with this. Not much unexploded ordnance in the Forth. Probably plenty, but there's never. It's not hugely deep, so it's not the end of the world. You can just find it and blow it up. Basically, as with the crossing over to Northern Ireland, engineering can do these things. It's just it doesn't make sense, and in this case, I think it does. This is bold and got a lot of people going, "Oh, it's bad," but actually, I think it's quite sensible. I think it's a sensible plan. It might seem quite bold, but good, because sometimes you do need bold. So I'm all for it. And in terms of cost, I think they're pitching at 6 billion ish. 7 billion, up to 6.8 billion, they were sort of saying. That's pennies, come on. It would be built over, what did I say? I think I did this in my thread about it. It'd be like, the time it was built over, it'd be like less than $1 billion a year. It's just, in fact, that's the whole plan in total. So it's just fine. It's fine. Do it. I think it's an excellent idea. And also, you could take fast Suburbans over as well, because essentially you should be using all electrics that have the same performance anyway. You could flight fast Suburbans over and connect up to Kirkcaldy and kind of Leavenmouth even, and whiz down and access Edinburgh from that side, and kind of you can kind of balance up. So you wouldn't. I'd be pleasing William Barter because by saying this, but you could still have a mixed timetable pattern through that tunnel, given the fact that it's a long tunnel without anything pestering, nothing to get in the way. You can everything can just flight through there. So fairly sensible. So, I don't know about, in terms of actual pathing, I've no idea about in terms of how many extra services you get over the bridge, but that's kind of a complicated question, really, to be honest. In any case, Yeah, Richard Smith says it's a much better use of tunnels than using it on the HS2 to satisfy some NIMBYs in the Cotswolds. Well, yeah, that's true. Right. It's now 8 o'clock. We're late, as ever. You all knew it would happen, but I don't think we're going to... Oh, I'm only on 3. Right. Let's see where we get to, shall we? So, we're into Section 3, regional services. That was just intercity services we were talking about. Now we're talking about regional services. So, most regional services are now running on a half-hour frequency. So, to grow capacity, the focus needs to be on lengthening trains to 8 or 9 carriages. The Glasgow network is intensively used and heavily congested, suffers from too many single-track branches, junctions, and has poor links from Edinburgh to everywhere southwest of Glasgow. Yeah, so they're talking about, this is basically fairly pragmatic redoubling of single-track lines that were doubled. So in theory, not a huge amount of work, although redoubling single-track lines, it's not as easy as just laying a track back, because often the track's been centralised when it's been singled. S&C is complicated, signalling is complicated, and often a two-track corridor as built in the 1800s is, or even even compared to what we would have done in the middle of the 1900s, is much narrower than a two-track corridor now. So keep going to the ballet finishes, says Roman Adicott. Yeah, that's a very good point. So that can be tricky, but I think it is sensible to propose it. It's talking about junction upgrades, grade separation in and around Glasgow particularly. A new overground terminal station should be developed at Argyle Street Station, which is interesting. So talking about high level above the car at the rear of the St Enoch Centre. So this would link into the revived, upgraded, electrified City Union line. So this is kind of acting as kind of elements of the Glasgow Crossrail sort of type service. So a lot of this is about Glasgow. Glasgow is like a key pinch point for the whole Scottish Railway network, because everything comes in from every angle, and things go wrong in Glasgow or problems in Glasgow, it ripples across the whole of the country. So there we go. So now this is interesting. This is another box that refers to the Green Party of England and Wales. So let's talk about that box first. They talk about local environmental impacts. The Rail for All programme focuses on upgrading existing lines because this is the most efficient, environmentally positive way of enhancing the network, but it also contains some proposals for entirely new infrastructure and reopening old lines that may have an impact on the local environment. We would expect all infrastructure projects to be developed in a way that minimises impact, and where there are objections, we would hope to see them resolved in collaboration with local communities, as was done with Borders. So they're kind of just saying exactly what happens, really, which is... And this is not throwing shade on new lines, because that's what's happening currently. HS2 is not a larger spend than we will spend more on the existing railway network over the lifespan of HS2 being delivered than the HS2's headline. So just as is the case in England, as a GB project, HS2 is not the majority of railway investment that's happening between 2010 and 2045, or whenever it's going to end up being completely kind of delivered. So that's kind of fair enough. It's a fair point. And again, they're talking about it. So they jump onto the Edinburgh network. They talk about single track sections, lack of overtaking loops. Borders was an enormous success, built down to a price, very low capacity, so already very limited. Yeah, just key things. Double tracking large sections of the Borders. They talk about all pretty sensible stuff. They're kind of interesting. They talk about regional services, but actually a lot of this is suburban improvements. So it's quite interesting. They're talking about improvements to the secondary main line from Glasgow to Carlisle via Kilmarnock and Dumfries, saying improving that to 100-mile-an-hour running. Again, kind of allowing duplication of regional, allowing trains and services to coalesce more easily, so that they're they can slot in amongst each other. And if you've got a whole network, it would be very good, not necessarily from a supply chain perspective, but certainly from an operational perspective, if every train did the same thing. Every train was 125-mile-an-hour capable, accelerated the same, was all electric. Because timetabling makes timetabling a lot easier, because at least then all you have to worry about is the freights, and then sufficient space in the timetable to allow stoppers and non-stoppers on two-track railways. Anyway, let's hop to number 4. There's a lot of beaching questions coming up. I should have got the klaxon up, shouldn't I? There's a lot of beaching questions appearing. We'll get there. So we're on to 4, rural routes and rolling stock replacement. So this is good, because again it's acknowledging the system view of the railway network, and acknowledging the fact that infrastructure wise sorry, infrastructure is not the whole picture. Rolling stock is a major part of. I talk about this a lot. I talk about the potential leaping capacity that HS2 provides. It ain't going to provide it if we don't improve the rolling stock procurement strategy. Well, have one. If we don't have an actual rolling stock procurement strategy for England and Wales, we're stuffed. So, we need to be ramping up the supply chain and steadily delivering new rolling stock alongside electrification and other such things now in readiness for the leaping capacity that HS2 can provide. Because if we don't have enough rolling stock to provide that leaping capacity, it ain't going to happen. Anyway, so this is talking about, interestingly, particularly talking about improvements to the southern end of the Far North Line, so Inverness to Thurso. That's because it's actually quite a busy commuting route across the Black Isle. So that's fair enough. Upgrades to the West Highland Line to raise the overall speed to 75 miles an hour. Again, there are people. It's actually quite well used, and you drive. You would push for you'd improve modal shift if you improve the journey times on that route. People do use it to go into Glasgow, get pissed up, and then come home again. I know because I used to travel amongst them when I was on with a rucksack on as a student. With me and Alex going up into the hills. We'd be in amongst the pissheads on the way back, and they'd all be geeing at Laldy, and we'd be sitting there either knackered and trying to sleep, or kind of feeling reasonably pleased at the level of joviality in the train, or frozen to death because the 156 heating had failed. One of those. Another thing they mention is upgrading the antiquated Girvan to Stranraer line. Yeah, it's pretty knackered as a bit of railway line, that. It needs to be heavily upgraded. And so that's what they propose, which is fair enough. So they're kind of picking out a few things there. They're also talking about the rolling stock. So they're saying it's critical that these rural routes are replaced with zero carbon stock, but they acknowledge that because rural lines are unlikely to be electrified over significant lengths, independent power sources will be needed. So this is where they talk about hydrogen again, and they talk about the fact that it's a renewable. It's a renewable, from renewable sources. Hydrogen's a limited resource. They propose battery trains that are able to charge when overhead wires are available as the best option. The trouble for that is that this is one of the errors in the report. Basically, it isn't realistic because battery trains cannot cover the distances that you have on the West Highland or the Far North lines. They just can't. They cannot cover those distances. So, that's a major essentially a shortcoming of the report. And I think I understand where they're coming from, but you will need either you need an alternative in the interim, or you continue running a diesel train. So that's essentially the equation. Battery just cannot provide anything over 100 kilometers. You cannot get a battery. You can't run a battery train. It's too far. So unless you slow down the timetable and have them park under a little rigid overhead conductor and charge up the battery in Crianlarich or somewhere like that. Which I don't think is going to happen quickly enough. I just don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's realistic. Doesn't mean they shouldn't continue to look into it. Maybe that is the possibility. Maybe you have fast charging at Crianlarich and Fort William, but I don't think it's enough for that route, to be honest. So this is a bit of a problem with the report. It's a bit of I think it's a bit of a gap in the report's understanding of the engineering. But that it can't be perfect, can it? Right. Okay. Here's another bit where I don't necessarily disagree. Actually, we'll come to this. I have an interesting. I can't make my mind up on tram train. Are they bad? Are they? They're bad trains and they're bad trams because they're not serving the number of stops they would be if they were on road, and they're not serving, and they're not quicker as optimized as they would be if they were on if they were just trains on rails. So mixed feelings, but I have to say they are a very clever option in the way that's being discussed here as a way to quickly deliver very quickly deliver upgrades. And there's some interesting discussions going on at the moment about reopening the line to Banchory as part of the kind of local election propaganda coming out of it, particularly from the SNP up in Aberdeen. And Aberdeen and kind of Aberdeenshire. What is it? Aberdeenshire South? I can't remember what the constituencies are. The Scottish constituencies are there anyway. And it kind of relates to this. So this is about tram trains. Section 5, tram trains for commuters and urban connectivity. And so the areas they talk about are delivering. So they're talking about tram trains in. So some places I don't agree with. So Glasgow, just the tram train just doesn't feel like a sensible option in Glasgow. The place to be doing this is Glasgow is a very dense, very big city that merits having proper metro services. So for me, I'd be saying expand Glasgow subway or provide more suburban metro density services. So I just think any solution in that where you build tram train, you might as well just go full hog and go for heavy rail. Edinburgh is saying tram trains Musselburgh to Haymarket and then on to Edinburgh Park. There's another formatting error in the report there. And the airport, using a reopened Edinburgh South Sub. Yeah, see, South Sub. The South Sub could be tram train and then tie into the Edinburgh tram network. But again, you could run. You might find it easier to just have it electrify the South Sub, which is kind of planned anyway. Electrify the South Sub and run electric kind of high density services back and forth, and then tie into a tram network. In Edinburgh and Glasgow, I'm not so sure this is right. However, in Dundee and in Aberdeen, I do think that tram train is a really good option. You haven't necessarily got the huge population density, but you have got the spread, the urban sprawl that this would solve. You can quickly get things running on road lines that you can then maybe shift later onto rail and improve speeds. I think those are particularly, from my perspective, Aberdeen, perfect example, up to Ellen and across to Banchory. Get tram train, and the argument often comes up, but if you do that, you need to alter platforms in Aberdeen. No, you don't. If you go for the Manchester Metrolink style, which is where they have high platform doors, so they don't have to, so they can use the existing platforms at heavy rail stations, which means ultimately that you could potentially then use heavy rail trains if you wanted to later, if you wanted to turn it into a dedicated heavy rail corridor. So I think tram train, but with high floors, as in high. Floors at 900-ish millimeters, so they'd have to be RVAR compliant anyway. So yes, I think that is no. Edinburgh Tram is not a tram train network. It's just it's LRT. It's not LRT. It's MCS. So LRT is what it's often called, but actually LRT is kind of. I prefer MCS as in medium capacity system because it avoids confusing people with thinking of light rail, because the Edinburgh Tram's not a light rail system; it's a medium capacity transport system. So that means it's kind of like modern trams, but it has sections of kind of ballasted track that's to tram specifications. But it's it's more like German style sort of S-Bahn type S-Bahn, sorry, Straßenbahn type system. Yes, so. So there's Forfar could do with heavy rail because it's a bit further out. Agreed, Harry Main. Yeah, it's a fair point. What's the difference between tram train and a flirt? A flirt is a train. It's just a regular train. Right. Anyway, so what else have they suggested? Well, that's that section 5. Section 6. So this is where it's getting interesting, and this is basically the reverse beaching page, except that they've not gone reverse beaching, which I'm very pleased about because. QI klaxon. So this is the key. This for me is one of the most important pages in the whole report, and it's coming back to the 5,000 people or more in a settlement thing. And what they've done here is point out all of the areas. Bear in mind the east coast of Scotland is generally the more populated side than the west coast. Glasgow is very busy, it's on the west coast, but other than that, the majority of the larger populations are in the kind of the verdant east, where you've got lots of rain shadow in there for lots of agriculture and lots of big market towns, and also Hawick and Pennycook. So although Erskine is there and not rail served, so they've basically listed off Fraserburgh, Peterhead, West Hill, Forfar, St Andrews, Leavenmouth, Broxburn, Erskine, Pennycook, and Hawick as places that are large and are not served. And they also list off then kind of additional possibilities, maybe tram train in Haddington, which is in East Lothian, Banchory near Aberdeen, or ish near Aberdeen, Strathaven and Newborough in Fife. Strathaven and Newborough in Fife, yeah. So, it's sensible. These are places that should be served by heavy rail or possibly by tram train. And so that's what they've kind of detailed. They've said these are places that should be rail served. It's acknowledging the fact that getting rid of these places that connected to the rail network, not only did it diminish, not only did it, if you can't access the rail network, you're not going to drive your car to, if you've driven your car 30 miles nearest railway station, you're just going to drive the whole way. So it's acknowledging that, and then also it's acknowledging the fact that accessibility to these places were, these towns, these settlements, these large towns were denied. They're essentially taken off the map by the lack of rail connection. So these places, the rail connection, even if it's not used, elevates them as settlements, as places people want to be, consider moving, running businesses, so on, visiting, so on and so forth. Anyone on the Borders Railway can testify to that recently in how much it just puts their areas on the map just by merit of the fact there was a railway station there. You're absolutely right, Richard Smith. The through ticketing is critical, absolutely. But this page is good. This is good, and the UK as a whole needs one of these. Every bit of the UK, even the island of Ireland, Northern Ireland needs this as well. There are so many places in England that are short of a connection. Quite a few of them in big urban areas, short of a connection, in fact, but lots of rural ones as well. This page, fantastic, really good stuff. I like that section a lot. I don't think there's much more to say other than very at peace with it. And whether it's full heavy rail or tram train, I think you look at it on a case by case basis. But some of these are kind of obvious heavy rail connection wins. Others you'd be looking at tram train making more sense, I think. It really depends on how it fits into if it's part of a larger suburban area, you might find tram train, depending on where the nearest heavy rail line is. St Andrews, they say tram train here. I don't think that makes sense. I think St Andrews is too far away from anything else. It'd be a bit weird to just have a tram train back and forth from Lucas to St Andrews. It'd be a bit weird. I think just have a heavy rail service that runs up and have a reversing service of some kind that goes up to St Andrews and then back. Into Fife or down to Aberdeen, maybe have your St Andrews as the termination, of 1 out of 4 of the new tunnel suburban services. Who knows? Right, section 7. So they are talking about reopening lines here, but this is not reopening new formerly abandoned lines. This is talking about the conversion of freight only lines back to passenger operation again. So the fact they added this in. This for me harks back a little bit to, it's like if there's a need for it, but only based on the previous section. I think this is a bit of a funny one because this seems like someone's added it in as a quick win. Really, it should fall under the same. I'd have preferred it if this was still section 6 and it was part 2 of section 6 as a way to quickly do it because. The Alloa, Cluckmannan, Kincardine and Longannet sort of connection, that route is kind of an obvious route to have passenger services on, but it should be judged on by the same rules as the previous section. So I mean, I don't know. Basically, they're saying I think it's possibly because someone who really wants to open this line, the Dunfermline to Alloa line, is wanted to put this in the report. That's all I can say. I don't know. It's a bit of a funny one. It's talking about connections to Fife to the west of Scotland, avoiding the Forth Rail Bridge. It's sensible. There are lots of sensible reasons for reinstating that passenger operations over that line. They talk about South Sub as well, so through Gorgie, Craig Lockhart, Morningside, Newington, Craig Miller, blah blah blah. Again, that's a line that makes sense. So fair enough. I think fair enough, but I'm kind of about it. There aren't that many. Simon Zev Kenley says clutching at low hanging fruit. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is a little bit of a. I just think it should have been part of section 6. It didn't need to be its own section. It got a bit beachingy when they talked about it. Like this only needs to be evaluated as part of the. It's a strategic benefit to both of those lines being. They only mention these two, the Alloa Cluckmannan, the connection. They also mentioned some of the others. Basically the Dunfermline Alloa line and the South Sub are the two they mention, and those are kind of obvious conversions. And I don't know how many others there are really. Interesting. Right, we're on to rail freight. Sorry, this is running on. 8:20. Anyway, let's see. So, shifting freight onto rail. Well, I don't really need to talk about this. This is just saying, do rail freight more, please, and improving overall railway. I think it's important to state it, to talk about rail freight, and to make sure that everything is framed in the idea of not forgetting our freight people, not forgetting our freight customers, and not just delivering bare minimum, but expanding on freight provision and passenger provision collectively. It's really important. But I don't have much to say about this one. Rail freight is good. Do that. And then likewise, on section 9, zero carbon rail. Again, yeah, do that. Do that. In terms of anything particular that they're talking about, they do want to bring forward the decarbonisation plans. So the electrification, they want to accelerate it more than the current Scottish Government plans. They're talking about committing to decarbonisation of the rail network by 2035. And they envisage, again, they're talking about hydrogen here. And they're talking about growing the hydrogen economy, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, there's some interesting discussions there. Talking about inefficiency of making hydrogen from renewables. Again, if you've got a dedicated wind turbine or solar plant that's generating hydrogen, that's fine. Hydrogen that's fine. It's just taking water. I don't see that as a problem. So if you're filling your trains up with hydrogen that's being generated by a little solar array in Fort William or Crianlarich, that's fine, or Oban, that's fine. So again, I think there's a little bit of there's a lack of pragmatism on the hydrogen opposition thing. I know you wouldn't expect me to be here defending hydrogen, right? None of you expected that, but hydrogen is actually it is a sensible proposal for the Highland, the West Highland Line, and for the Far North Line. Sorry to say it, but it is actually sensible. So, basically, there's not much to say again on that section, other than the hydrogen thing is a bit silly, and they're kind of calling for a clear policy of electrifying the network and linking this to further increase in renewable energy generation. Absolutely, yeah. And then they're talking about battery trains, but they're getting a bit. Yeah, they're putting a lot of eggs in the battery basket when batteries are by no means perfect. Whereas, yeah, I don't know. This is, as I said when I talked about kind of in my piece I published on this report is not perfect. There's a lot of great stuff in here, but there's some things I don't agree with. James P says, I think the anti-hydrogen fixation stems from an assumption it'll be derived from the fossil fuel industry. Yeah, I think that does cover it to an extent. Yeah, agreed. I think that has introduced a bias. It is a perception of it being which at the moment that is where the hydrogen comes from. But I'm writing a piece on hydrogen at the moment, actually, for rail that'll hopefully go out fairly soon. Actually, the plans are currently the plans that are closest to coming to fruition for hydrogen are in the northeast of England. Those plans are to skip brown hydrogen altogether and go straight for blue and green hydrogen, by which I mean hydrogen from renewable sources. So that for me is quite interesting. There's a realization that there's a perception that the industry cannot just basically just be the equivalent of burning diesel anyway, which it kind of isn't, but whatever. So there's a desire for that to be for the hydrogen for the northeastern hydrogen plans to use green hydrogen. So that's interesting. I plan to write a bit more of that. Write that in my rail piece. So we'll get to that. And we're kind of at the end here. So I like the title of this section, 10 rail for all costs. Well, for me, I think they you could scratch through 4 and say rail at all costs. Yeah, I'm up for that because that's buying into my kind of economics. Yeah, capex is unimportant, but even if you do want to frame capex as being important, this is an unbelievably trivial amount of penny. This is like, what is it, 1 something billion a year, which is less than's currently spent on, I think it's about the same as is spent on road in Scotland a year. So this is not some radical, dramatic increase. So they've bundled in. I mean the numbers. So the number for new stations is a bit low to my mind. It's all in millions. 500 million for new stations. Talking about 3 billion for new routes. That's route upgrades. So I think all of this, in some cases, I think some of this is a bit optimistic. But it's still like, even if it's 50% more than that, it's still not. It's still reasonably trivial. It would represent a partial increase in GDP percentage investment, but again, you get a return on it all. So there's money going into people's pockets, which in turn gets spent. There's an increase in chance to increase engineering skills, which increases the number of high-skilled jobs, which increase blah blah blah. So it's positive stuff all around, really. And you're also increasing the potential for jobs to shift away from more damaging things. So where people are working in jobs that probably shouldn't exist anymore. Airline industry is a good example. Shift those over to rail. There's a potential to be kind of enhancing. I'm not a growth for growth's sake. I don't have that view of the economy. I don't think that's just how the world, capitalism can get stuffed. But elevating people kind of getting more in life, having opportunities in life, I think is something to be applauded and pushed forwards. So overall they say 22 billion. So it's just not. That's just undramatic. No one should be offended by that volume of money. It's just an undramatic amount of money. It really is. Steve Wood says that the A9 is about 500 million a year at the moment alone. Yeah, well, that's a project that needs to be stopped in its tracks right there. So there we go. Yeah, 22 billion. It's fine. So they're not including so they're kind of to an extent distributing the costs of the East and West Coast mainline upgrades kind of out of this. So I don't know if they're included in the total or if they're kind of saying, well, they're included in the total, but we'd get some penny on that. Who knows? But basically, it's fine. 22 billion seems quite sensible to me. And to close off, I've already said that I think this is a really good way to close this off. And yeah, they're talking about economic benefit and jobs being created. So it's interesting that they put those kind of front and centre, but the reality is that people in Scotland, the modal share is by car is high. It's high. Scotland's lots of rural areas, roads, people drive everywhere. And there are lots of journeys that can shift to rail. There are lots of easy win journeys that can shift to rail, particularly in the Central Belt. And the modal share is has improved dramatically in the last 15 years in the Central Belt as a result of these improvements in the Airdrie Bathgate, borders, but particularly electrification as well, has really driven a jump in provision. The Central Belt is the only area outside of London in the UK that operates as a kind of an urban hub. Multiple cities and urban area are kind of really working to elevate them above where they would be as individual areas. That doesn't happen anywhere else because everywhere else is either insular thinking or government hasn't allowed kind of combined thinking or devolution to enable regional clustering. Agglomeration effects, I think, is the official term, right? Only happens in London. Or inside the M25, should I say. Anyway, so, yeah, they're just talking about economic benefits and blah, blah, blah. But basically, I'm glad that they are pointing out that the kind of the key thing is that it's about the idea that building sustainable transport is a key pathway in the recovery, for the economic recovery from COVID. I'd say maybe forget the economic recovery. It's the social recovery, providing people jobs who have maybe lost their jobs. This is a key component in bringing us, in taking us forwards into this kind of slightly different world. The world is not going to change as much as a lot of people are saying. In some cases, that's a bit of a shame. In other cases, it's probably a good thing that it's not changing as much as people are saying, because actually a lot more people drive now than they did pre-pandemic. That's horrifying. Climate change. Global warming is a major problem, and we cannot just abandon the railways because the numbers have dropped because of a load of policy choices to combat a pandemic. So yeah, I'm glad this is the last page because it's important to hammer that point home, as I did in the episode about coronavirus a while back. All the same stuff. Nev, hi to Nev in Kemney. Confirm public transport in rural areas is terrible. Yeah. Inverurie was always quite lucky because we were like the fastest growing town in Europe for quite a while, thanks to the all. We had the 307, which I think has now been squished into the 37. Why did they do that? The 307 was always the bus I used to get. I used to sit on the back of the... Actually, yeah, because nowadays I'm a cool kid, and I sit at the front of all double-decker buses because I want to see the view. Back in the olden days, obviously you sit at the back of the double-decker bus. So being at the back of the double-decker bus with the view out the back window on the A96, going in Aberdeen to, I don't know, we went to Subway and went to the cinema. That was pretty much like the routine on a Saturday. Doing that was awesome, and using my young Scott to get free bus travel as well. Mint, love that. In any case, right, we're going to go into the Q&A section now. So I'm going to go big face. That was the report. Everyone. 110 of you watching. Hopefully that was insightful. I don't know. Was that useless? Was it insightful? Was it helpful? Let's go big face to go Q&A before I finish. So there are some questions. So Nev's pointing out hopefully there'd be an element of alleviation of the problems of public transport now that Kintor is back on the rail network. Yeah, agreed. As long as the bus network is suitably integrated into it. I don't know. Are they doing some more stuff with shifting the bus network, kind of realigning it? I hope so. Lewis, are you from Kemney as well? Oh, I kind of knew that. I think. Big up the Kemney Massive. Nice one. Let's see. Next one, David Shepherd. They need to make sure that any new railways in Scotland are able to handle growth in case improved trains induce more demand than anticipated. Well, that always happens. There's a huge amount of constrained public transport demand in the UK. Scotland's no exception to that. So when you do improve things, the predictions are always exceeded on rail. Like borders. Borders was hilarious. How rapidly it was just oversubscribed and incapable of providing the level of provision. It was frustrating, but also funny how off all the economic models are. And yet we've learned nothing, because we're back to square one. Even Transport Scotland have been shrink wrapping things that they should really be. Carstairs is a good example of this. They've just utterly shrink wrapped that when it should be possibly, and I hope that's because they're looking longer term and they're actually going to just bypass Carstairs altogether. Who knows? But anyway, yeah. So any other questions, folks? Send them in. I'll pick if you send them in. I'll pick them up at the end again. But let's go back to let's head over here. You know what's about to happen. Oh, that was it. We'll do a bit. If there are any more questions, I'll answer them just at the very end. But we are available on all of the many audio platforms. I think we're at the point where now we're basically available on all podcasting platforms. There are no podcasting platforms we're not on, I think. Thank you, Giel, for that. Nice work. What else? Oh yeah, that's right. So Patreon. So come support me on Patreon if you want to. It allows me to do more of this. It allows me to open up a PDF and talk it through with 110 people watching. But it's useful. I think it basically means that you don't have to read it. If I'm reading it and talking through it, then you don't have to do anything other than sort of vaguely absorb it, right? Maybe that is a useful service. Someone said the other day that it'd be really good if someone did this for health. For health papers. I'd be up for that. I'm not personally doing it. Maybe I'll recommend Dina to do that. That'd be good. Anyway, right. She's not nearly as conceited as I am to think that I can talk in an all-worldly manner about reports. Anyway, exclusive sneak peeks. Yeah, you get loads of freebies and stuff, and also I ask you questions. If you don't want to support me on Patreon, then you can do so through PayPal. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis for PayPal, and Patreon.com/Gareth Dennis for the Patreon. People are asking. So yeah, the Discord it's still there for everyone who's on the Discord. Ella, I don't know if you wanted me to even mention it, but I'm going to mention it. But I've blurred it out for now because the Discord is kind of on lockdown at the moment for reasons. Everything's fine, we're all okay, but nasty people. So it's on lockdown at the moment. Don't be dissuaded. Do come and join in hopefully a week. Ella, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have said that because then all the nasty 4chan people will come in a week and do it. Anyway, basically, we'll hopefully have the link. It's still up and running. People who are already in there, it's still there. I'm sure you can still do it. But basically, we had let's call it a security lapse, and we're resolving that. So the links are down at the moment. The Kai TD, the Kai AD, sums it up exactly. Right, so Romy Adcrack says that Dina and I should swap one week. I do the ballet and she can talk trains. I do need to get Dina on at some point. We need to pick a subject. I'd love to get her on. Anyway, right. What else? Right, I've got plugs to do. So tomorrow night, all of you who are on here, who want to see me do a debate on HS2, like a proper debate, as in where I have to do an opening pitch and then deal with people saying things. And also I have to script it because it's like 2 minutes. I have 3 minutes opening pitch. And you know what I'm like. I've just talked for an hour and a half, non-stop. So I have to script it and write it and say it very rigidly because otherwise I'll just blow that 3 minutes out of the water. So yeah, that's going to be fun. And it's it's The World Transformed. This is a big platform. Please come and watch because otherwise So I think Raleigh is joining as one of the protesters, one of the Extinction Rebellion protesters, I think. And if all the Extinction Rebellion people just come in and swamp it, it'll be no fun at all. So if you're a real person, come and get involved. If you're on the left and you think HS2 is a good idea, or if you don't and you think it's a bad idea, hopefully I can convince you. Come and join to see, and hopefully there'll be some interesting perspective on both sides. Actually, I'm actually looking forward to seeing both sides. Hopefully there'll be some new arguments, so I have to think on my feet and kind of justify that. I've got some, most of it's in my brain, but I do need to actually write some notes down of specifics. And what I will do is calculate a back of envelope. Pete Johnson, actually, I'm going to grab your spreadsheet again and do a back of envelope calculation for how quickly HS2 can be carbon neutral if you take a look at the bigger picture. So yeah, that should be interesting. So that's tomorrow night at 7. So this time tomorrow night, or rather at 7 p.m. tomorrow night, please come watch. That should be good. There is a link. If you just Google this, there's a link. I'll put a link in the description. But to be honest, just Google it. Just Google The World Transformed HS2 and it'll appear. And I'll retweet it as well. It'll be my pinned tweet tomorrow. Next thing, also HS2 themed. It's not the Looney Tunes. What's it now? What is it? Amplify Stroud have now a podcast, and on Friday they're going to be plugging the episode that I'm in, talking about HS2. So I'm on things talking about HS2 this week. It is actually available now on Spotify. You can go and have a listen to it. But I'm going to plug it on Friday. Tomorrow I'm going to be plugging this, and then Friday I'll be plugging this. So yeah, that should be that should be. I had a listen. It's good. Well, I just talk a lot. I don't shut up. But if you're up for that sort of thing, the reason I do it might be repetitive, but actually it's good to hear that. It's good for me to hash the arguments out again and reword them and clarify them, think of better ways to make those arguments. So yeah, it was a really good fun podcast with Cassius. It was a good laugh. Hopefully I'll join them again actually to talk about the intersection of progressive politics and trains. Yeah, right. What else? That's Tim Dunn's feet in a hot tub. Go watch the last episode. It was good fun, and also watch the little outtakes video that Tim did. It was it tickled me quite substantially. I enjoyed that. Now, next week, we're back to we're revisiting the Engineer's Guide to Being a Good Craneista, Part 2. I need to have a think about this and work out what I need to rewatch Part 1 to work out what I didn't say in Part 1 and then put it into Part 2. But we are going back. We're going back to the Guide to Being a Good Craneista. I think we might have a look at Penrith Darlington, but also we might look at York to Beverley and have a look at what that, what I do as a Craneista. So, limited resources, but making a more realistic looking pretend railway and how to do that and what the approach should be. And how I go about doing these sorts of things when I'm working out how realistic a proposal is. So, right, all of that. I'm going to get my big, massive mug back. All I can say, well, are there any questions? Steve Wood saying, straighten up to... Oh, wait. Matt Reed asking, will it be recorded tomorrow night? I don't know if it'll be recorded. I hope so. I hope it'll be recorded. Straighten up to Stranraer and build hydrogen ferries and Carlisle to Stranraer equals Northern Irish link for less than Boris's mad tunnel. Yeah, that's true. Richard Smith, my day job in railways actually involved some Crane East action this week. I was so happy. Amazing. Am I talking about the Bowes Railway? Asks Matt Reed. Yes and no. No. I'm referring to a reinstated North Pennine, well, not a an entirely new North Pennine mainline that in some cases makes use of former track beds. I don't do reopenings. I do new railway lines that make use of former railways because building on a former track bed is no less complicated than maybe legally a little bit because you're not intersecting lots of land boundaries, but by and large it's no less complicated than just building a completely new greenfield railway. In some cases it's more problematic because you've got land take and urban sprawl and all sorts to deal with. Anyway, I don't think there are any more questions, which means that I'm only... Oh, good grief, that was an hour and 38 minutes. I'm so sorry, everyone. We've still got 100 people watching. You're all lovely, and I've had a very pleasurable time talking through a report with you in PDF form. Hopefully that's useful. Thanks to the Scottish Greens for putting that together. Good work. I know I've talked about some shortcomings in it, but don't be disheartened. It's a really good piece. If you want to read my kind of more coherent and slightly shorter lowdown, it's on Medium. It's my latest piece published on Medium, so go and have a look at that. I also need to publish my track gauge piece too, don't I, at some point soon? Anyway, maybe I'll save that for when I do the track gauge rail natter. Maybe I should have done that one next week, but I'm not. Next week, Crane Easting. Anyway, everyone is here. You're wonderful. How much the report will be acted upon stands to be seen, doesn't it? But the fact that it's been put there and it can be critiqued is more than any of the other parties have done. It's all very well haranguing from the sidelines, but unless you've got your own plan, it's all talk. Labour. Anyway, right, go to bed, everyone. You're all lovely, and I will see you all. I'll see you all very soon. See you next week. Or on Friday as well if you want to join the stream. Anyway, right, enough of that. You saw all the adverts. Cheerio! Cheerio!